Andrew Baker, welcome to the CIO Master Series.
Thank you very much.
BlueScope Steel is a major Australian industrial company supplying the international market with steel products. Your previous role, however, was in the food business at Mars Corporation. What was it like moving from the food business to the steel business?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Now, I did have some history in the steel business before I actually joined Mars, and that was through my consulting days. But putting that aside, it is quite a step, or it's a change, particularly given the manufacturing intensity that you get in the steel industry compared to fast-moving consumer goods. Look, I think the scale of operation was one of the big differences. Also, its capital intensity and the length of the decision-making cycle were the big things that I found quite different. The complexity of the business as well was a significant change. So, the steel industry is it's unusual in the sense that the bill of materials, which really governs the way the product is made, is actually upside down in comparison to what it is in the fast-moving consumer goods industry. So, assembling things into a product and then selling that's quite different to making a product and then disassembling it into a whole range of other things and selling it. It's much more complicated. And that, I think, has formed part of the mind candy that's been part of the role and really made it quite good. So, yeah, it's quite challenging, difficult. The IT component of that is tough. And I've really enjoyed that challenge and the change from that.
I imagine that the logistics and supply chain management issues are extremely complex at a company like BlueScope Steel. Does this complexity place a greater burden on you as the CIO than if you worked in a different industry sector?
Well, in some ways I'd say yes, but then I'd also temper that with the thought that if I was working in the banking or insurance sectors, I mean, the level of IT intensity in those industries is pretty significant. But that being said, in the manufacturing and resources space that I prefer to play in, I think it's probably up there in that level of complexity. So I think from a CIO perspective, it's challenging, very challenging intellectually to be able to identify what an appropriate structure, particularly, let's say, architecture, application architecture, you should put in place to ensure that the company is going to be, competitive into the future. And that's where I think the IT strategy component comes into play most importantly in my role, is that how do you structure application architecture such that you can deliver a capability to keep you competitive in the future? Because the steel industry, global game, they're all driving for productivity and efficiency gains to stay competitive. So, from an IT practitioner's role, a CIO role, it's challenging to structure the right application architecture to ensure that in those long lead time projects that we've got to get that capability on the ground to keep us competitive. That's where the pressure comes in on the CIO role.
What are your qualifications and how important are they to your role at BlueScope Steel?
My qualifications, I started out, my initial formal qualification was I'm an industrial chemist, and I did that through Melbourne University, so applied science in industrial chemistry. And then that took me through a sort of a scientific pathway, and then I jumped into the IT space through Accenture and consulting. From there, the next certification I got was in production and inventory control through the APIX, the old APIX organisation, and I think that was pretty important for my understanding of IT systems around manufacturing. I ended up actually lecturing that course, and I think I learnt more as a lecturer than I did as actually as a student of that course. And I think that's formed a foundation for, or an academic foundation for my thinking around how manufacturing businesses actually work. And I subsequently did another degree, post-grad dip in securities. And that one's somewhat more tangential, let's say. But the most important one, I think, in terms of my role was the certification in production and inventory management. That was directly applicable and formed a foundation, a fabric that I sort of hang my ideas on.
Tell me about your career. How did you make your way from university graduate to Chief Information Officer for a huge listed industrial company?
I started out with an ambition to stay in the manufacturing and resources space because of my training, and getting out of that sort of industry. I was in research and development with Shell very briefly before I went to Accenture. Back then it was Arthur Andersen. And I sort of went there looking for experience in different manufacturing companies, and in the consulting role I thought I'd get that, which I did. I think really it grew out of that experience. The consulting role for me was fantastic because I was able to get into so many different companies for a relatively short period of time, up to a year or a year and a half with the longer stints. And I did a number of those, and I got to know those companies very well. And I also got to a level of responsibility in project delivery early and also fairly intensely. So I felt that experience was pretty foundational, was fundamental. And as I got higher up the ranks in Accenture, I got more responsibility, and the role became more strategic, and I was able to make or do project work and work with companies around that space, which I enjoyed greatly. So I felt in some senses that consulting experience was a bit of a development hothouse for me, and it certainly was delivered a lot of experience very quickly. It was also extremely hard work, I might add. My wife found my commitment to work to be somewhat of a drag. But going from that, and I wanted to get into industry and experience life outside the consulting space, very different working in industry than it is working in the fast-moving pace of the consulting game, with project after project. Whereas in the industry move that I made to Mars, I was looking there for more experience in a line role, and in longer term project work, and also in longer term living with the results of the work that I've been doing. And I got that with Mars. I was they were running a program there that was, I felt, incredibly ambitious, and they were very successful in delivering that globally, and I was quite thankful to be part of that process. But that took me from the consulting world, fast-paced, project-based work into a business where these much longer-term decision-making cycles, and also working with people on an line management role as opposed to just a project management role. I felt that was important to making that transition into industry, and I got a chance to get a role with BlueScope and took it, and it was basically a series of serendipitous events, I think, that landed me in the role.
At what point did you feel that you had what it takes to be a leader in a major listed company?
I'm not sure it actually occurs as a point in time, but I guess I've always aspired to some level of management, and the reason for that, I think, is that I enjoy the opportunity to make a contribution and to have some decision-making responsibility over things and set direction, and also be responsible for the outcomes on the back of that direction. I sort of enjoy that challenge, and I like to measure myself against it. So I think it really comes back to something like a desire for a level of control and input over events and where they're going, and I guess there's a sort of certain level of belief that you might be able to get that right, and I think that came probably fairly early in my consulting days, as I felt that I could make a contribution that way, and my judgment wasn't too bad, so back myself and see how I go in the management ranks.
In your time as a senior technology manager, how has the position and the responsibilities of the CIO changed?
Yeah, I think things have changed, and progressively changed, to be more or to be less technology focused and to be more business focused. Now, that's occurring, at greater or lesser extents in different industries. But in my industry, I think that we've seen the senior management of IT role change from being an infrastructure facing role or directed role to more of an application delivered role, a focused role, and I see that continuing. And I see the IT function or the IT role becoming more business oriented and perhaps becoming more closely aligned to business service delivery in the organisation. So through things like shared services and stuff like that. So I see the IT, or at least the Chief Information Officer role, the senior IT role, blending more into a mainline business role, becoming less technology and infrastructure focused, and being more business outcomes, business process, and operationally focused role. I think that trend will continue from what has now been, must be about 10 years of that, pushing in that direction. That'll be my view.
How will technology change your industry over the foreseeable future?
So I think that it actually will start to look more like the fast-moving consumer goods industry over time, become more efficient, and competition will move more from a production capability to a customer service proposition in the future. And I think that we'll see continued drive for productivity gains out of IT. So what I mean by that is basically I think we will continue to harvest automation benefits from automating or industrialising business processes, both in the back office and also in the front offices of our businesses. So that'll continue to drive the steel industry basically on the basis of cost competitiveness. The steel industry is driven by low cost steel production, and I think that's going to increasingly be increasing using IT systems to enable that capability on a global scale.
Where to from here? Do you see yourself stepping into a CEO role sometime soon?
The way IT works, I think, it depends a lot on the industry itself. And IT, where our CIOs step into CEO roles, it's typically where IT is of fundamental strategic importance to the market-facing side of the business, and you can see that occurring in industries like banking and other very IT-intensive industries that really their competitive teeth is their IT, or their services delivered all over IT. So that sort of capability or that sort of step is actually more likely to occur in those sort of industries. In the steel industry, IT is not of that same importance. It's important, but it's not fundamental to the actual market proposition or the capability of making and delivering steel. So for me, I don't think that I'm likely to step into the CEO's role in a big hurry. However, the next step for somebody like me would be into possibly another business function or an expanded role, taking on more responsibilities, in addition to IT, and that seems to be fairly common sort of pathway for CIOs in the manufacturing and resources type of industries. So I'd expect it to be something with added responsibility, but still retaining my IT responsibilities.
Andrew Baker, thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure, thank you.